Hi. This is Carrie Truman. I'm filling in for Colin Bevan, No Impact Man. Colin had to be giving a talk somewhere this evening, so I'm going to be taking over. And as you probably know, today is Food Day for No Impact Week. For tonight, we've got Patty Lavera from Food and Water Watch and Josh Fertel from Slow Food USA, and they'll be taking your questions. Maybe we'll start by having Josh talk about what Slow Food USA is doing. Josh, would you like to fill us in?
Sure. So Slow Food USA is an organization with members all over the country, and they're generally people who really care about the food they eat and the story behind it, where it comes from. And so Slow Food USA has chapters all over, and those chapters do local work to make food and farming better in their community. Sometimes that might be starting a farmer's market in a community that doesn't have one. In another place, that might be setting up a garden or cooking curriculum for public school students. It really depends on what that community has. But then nationally, we get together and we try to speak with a collective voice to really push for change to federal policy, push for big structural change that will impact our food system. So really trying to remove barriers to what we think of as a good, clean, fair food system. Lately, we've been working on pushing on child nutrition through our Time for Lunch campaign. We're pushing Congress to create a school lunch policy that will give schools the resources they need to give healthy lunch to kids. That's what we're working on lately. If you want to learn more about that, you can check it out at slowfoodusa.org/time for lunch. We launched that campaign with a big day of action on Labor Day. We had 307 actions simultaneous demonstrations, and they were like part potluck, part sit-in. They were in every state. We had 20,000 people together pushing Congress for good, clean, fair food for our kids.
Sounds great. So, Patty, do you want to tell us a little bit about what Food and Water Watch is working on these days, and tell us a bit about the organization itself?
Yeah, so hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. My name's Patty, and I work for a group called Food and Water Watch, and I'm in my office here in DC, and we also have an office in San Francisco. And so we do a lot of food policy, but we also talk about fish and what kind of fish we should be eating, how we should manage our fisheries to make sure we are getting good, clean fish and doing it in an environmentally responsible way. And we also talk about water, and specifically when you're talking about no impact, we have a campaign called Take Back the Tap, which is we think that people should not be buying water in little bottles and then throwing those little bottles away, but we should work collectively and really invest in our public water system so everybody can get clean water from their tap.
Okay, Josh, I have a question for you from Wendy Kirstner in Fort Myers, Florida, and she's got a question about school lunch. She wants to know why schools still teach the food pyramid over whole foods. In other words, I'm sure just over choosing real, fresh, simple, nutritious produce rather than this USDA food pyramid that is partly inspired by all kinds of ag industry lobbyists.
So school lunch is really determined by a number of players, none of whom are parents who care about their kids. And if you wanted to mastermind a national health crisis in our country, you would create something that looks a lot like our federal school lunch policy. So the food pyramid is, I think of it as a relic of two things. One are these nutritional guidelines, and the other are the interests of agribusiness and large food companies that help us determine what our public policy is around nutrition in schools. And school nutrition directors really have their hands tied because they need to meet federal policy around what school lunch should be. They need to meet USDA standards. So it's really hard for them to break through that and stop basing their lunch program on the food pyramid and start basing it on real food. Again, these new standards that came out, I think, will push in the right direction. Instead of talking about calories and nutrition standards based on calories and nutrients, they talk about it based on real food. They say you should plan menus not around the percentage of fat versus percentage of sugar, but you should plan them around serving real food, fruits and vegetables, leafy greens, kind of common sense nutrition guidelines. So a shift in that direction I see coming only if two things happen. One, if government takes those new standards seriously, and two, if citizens, mainly parents, really push their legislators to do the same.
We've got another question from Jeremy Umansky in Hyde Park, New York. How can farmers such as myself get in the classroom to educate students? Patty, do you want to take that one? You have an answer for Jeremy?
It's a great question. It'd be great to get more farmers in the classroom and make sure they have time to take out of growing food to go into a classroom and talk to folks. I would suggest, talking to your local school system and trying to identify there should be a school food service director, and then also talking to some of the administrators and kind of offering yourself up as a real life farmer we could get these kids talking to. And then there's also a lot of networks that are out there, besides Slow Food's working on this, we're working on this, but there's also a Farm to School network, the Community Food Security Coalition. There's a lot of groups out there that are focused on kind of building these connections, so they might be good resources too.
Well, following up on this whole conversation about getting more fruits and vegetables into the schools, there was a great report, what Josh was talking about just a minute ago, this new study coming out calling for more fruits and vegetables. There was a report on ABC World News last night about the Meatless Monday program in the Baltimore schools. I don't know if you all are familiar with that, but it's interesting. Just on Monday, they're giving kids other choices, legumes, other sources of protein, and just cutting back on the meat for one day. And the parents have all been very supportive of it, but not surprisingly, there's been pushback from, the industrial meat industry. And I wonder if, Josh, you could speak to what parents could do to show support for programs like this that are encouraging kids to eat more fruits and vegetables and teaching them about how to grow their own food. There seems to be a lot of support at the grassroots level, but then you've got incredibly well-funded what we call AstroTurf organizations like the Center for Consumer Freedom, which just wants to be sure that you can choose between Pepsi and Coke, doesn't really want kids to have the option of fresh, healthy produce. So I don't know if that's something that you want to take on, but I'm throwing it your way anyway, so there you go.
Well, I think that the main thing is that parents just need to speak from the heart, and they need to speak from the heart to the people who run the dining programs at their school, but also to the people who create their laws, the people who they elect. And we need to not, for a minute, let these industry organizations that are pretending to be grassroots organizations get away with it. On the way over, I picked up on my phone a tweet from the National Corn Growers Association trying to set up a massive protest against soda tax. And they're interested in keeping the soda tax from happening is because corn is the key ingredient in high fructose corn syrup, which is the key ingredient in these sugary drinks. And so of course they'd like to create a citizens movement against the tax on soda. But they are not a citizens organization, they're an industry organization. And so we need to call them out when they pretend to be something that they're not. The most honest thing, I think the thing that will get this movement the farthest, really will be the voice of parents who don't want to have to make a choice between their kid not having lunch and their kid eating lunch that's going to make them sick. That voice is a really strong voice. That's the voice that will change the way school lunch looks over the next few years, I think.